020, April 18, 2025, Red Number 983 hours of progress in the Global Horror Simulation. Currently, a major feature has been implemented in the form of loading a custom 3D model with its texture properly applied. This is pretty neat, as this 3D model was created entirely from scratch in Blender, from just a cube, and the different faces were unwrapped and textures were applied to them using a texture atlas, which is basically a single image where different areas can represent different textures. So basically a way of storing multiple textures within one image. And this was exported to FBX format without being triangulated, and a custom 3D FBX file parser was used that was written entirely from scratch. So that's this FBX SDK project, and this one is just being done without any rendering. So in order to verify that it actually works, that code is then ported over to the 3D renderer, and after parsing that data, the interesting thing is that of course it needs to be stored in the UVs need to be stored within a 2 32-bit floats, or a structure that contains 2 32-bit floats. And then, interestingly enough, it would appear that the Y position of the vertex UV has to be flipped, otherwise the texture becomes unaligned, which would indicate that DirectX and Blender actually store their UV coordinates differently. Looking online, this explanation was provided. As to the validity of that, it seems to be true, as not flipping the texture causes or the texture coordinate causes when the texture is applied, it's misaligned. So the fix for that is to just flip the UV along its Y, and now it is being perfectly rendered. And one benefit of actually doing this was that a artifact is seen, which is not a visual bug of the render, but actually something in the literal texture file. So the way this was created is a bunch of grids where there's grids of black and white lines, so basically a bunch of grids, and then in a paint program dots were placed sort of sporadically just to create the different faces, and they were erased, but apparently this portion was not erased, and that actually shows up on the 3D mesh, and that's pretty neat that that shows up there, because this was not really visible while editing it in Blender. So getting out of that workspace and going just into the normal object mode view, yeah, it's right there, but that is barely visible when it's at default viewport shading now. With it set to is that material mode? Yeah. Yeah, setting it to material preview, it is more visible, but that wasn't really necessary while editing it and creating it in Blender to view it. But yeah, so this actually helps in seeing it within the render, so that's really cool. And what's really nice about this is that any sort of object can be created now in Blender, at least a basic low poly object, and it can be guaranteed to have its texture wrapped properly, which is pretty powerful, as more complex models can begin to be made and loaded in. So right now this process is one mesh at a time and applies the texture to it, but the code for just looping through a scene and gathering all the meshes is not that much more complicated than this. At this point the UVs are being gathered properly and the vertices are being gathered properly. The intention going forward is to look at code for gathering the indices from the 3D meshes. That's not been something that's been applied yet, as it's a bit more complex to just get the index data and make sure that's drawn properly. So the intention was to make sure the object can be drawn first, then get the index data, and as well as getting the index data so the object can be drawn faster. Looking into how to animate 3D models using the FBX SDK, so that would be 3D animation completely from scratch with C++. That's another thing to look into. So finally, 3D models being loaded with their textures applied. Pretty nice feature.